Hello everybody. In this video, we will try to understand some more interesting things about Bharani Nakshatra. So, we understood basically the Ashwini Nakshatra is where the consciousness and awareness met for the first time and created life and healing. So, the two Ashwini Kumaras basically, the life and healing. So, this life and healing are traveling side by side, supporting each other. So that duality. So because of that duality only, we are seeing the Prakriti and the Purusha, the man and the woman on the earth. And then the next nakshatra is Bharani Nakshatra, which is actually the representation. Its representation is yoni, its cosmic womb, which is actually the container of the spark of life that was created at Ashwini Nakshatra. So this particular cosmic womb, which is Bharani here, is the nakshatra of a kind of restrainment, a kind of containment, and it is a nakshatra of nourishment. If there is no nourishment, the life will not continue, right? The spark of life that was created in Ashwini Nakshatra would not continue, and the life has to grow. So for that, nourishment is required. Nourishment is required. A kind of containerization is required. So that is Bharani Nakshatra. So Venus is the planet representing this particular nourishment, this particular containerization. So in this particular nakshatra, the Bharani Nakshatra, how Jupiter would feel basically. So what is Jupiter and how it feels Bharani Nakshatra? See, we know Ashwini is the spark of life. Bharani is that cosmic womb that contains and sustains life. But just imagine it is a Venusian nakshatra. Jupiter is a planet of morality and wisdom. It's a planet of expansion and growth. So you may think, okay, Jupiter is representing growth, so somehow Jupiter should be comfortable in the nakshatra Bharani. But actually, Jupiter is not comfortable in the Bharani nakshatra. Jupiter is not fine with the energy of Bharani. So how it feels, how Jupiter feels fundamentally. See, Ashwini is the spark of creation. Bharani is the womb or containment. This is what we have been discussing in this Nakshatra encyclopedia videos. But see, this Bharani requires boundaries. Bharani requires boundaries. That is the most important point here. Bharani is about boundaries. If there is no boundary, the spark of life will not grow at all. To protect that spark of life, that boundary is required. That boundary is Yama. Yama is that boundaries. The Om's discipline is required. It's not a punishment, it's a discipline, it's a boundary, and that is required for the life to continue. So this Bharani so that Venus is required here. That Venus, the Venusian energy is required. Venusian energy is always about harmony. Venusian energy is always about harmony. It's always about preservation. Venus actually cultivates life. We say Venus as Shukra. You know, Shukra is required. Is that Shukra in Vedic terminology is actually it is required for the life growth. The Shukra energy is required for life growth. Venus preserves that life. Venus cultivates that life. But Venus does not enforce a lot of structure, of course. But Venus beautifies, Venus harmonizes, Venus nourishes and stabilizes. And the boundary that we're talking here The restriction, it's not a kind of punishment, it's not a kind of restriction, it's a kind of discipline, it's a kind of boundary for life to continue. So Venus is comfortable in Bharani because the womb must nourish life. The womb requires pleasure, it requires warmth, it requires softening, and that Venus can provide. Venus brings joy, Venus brings attraction, magnetism. Venus is the planet of fertility. Venus is the planet of fertility in Vedic astrology, right? So Venus makes the womb living. So Venus, of course, is the planetary ruler of Bharani Nakshatra, and Venus is required for Bharani, and Venus is comfortable in Bharani. Venus feels naturally at home in the Bharani Nakshatra, of course. But Jupiter is not comfortable. Why Jupiter is not comfortable? See here, Venus works with a kind of body. It works with matter. It works with a kind of form. But Jupiter generally works with spirit. It works with philosophy. You're getting it? Jupiter doesn't work with form. It works with a kind of meaning. Venus is the representation of value, pleasure and fertility, whereas Jupiter is the representation of expansion. It's the representation of faith. It's the representation of wisdom. So Venus is a kind of intimate energy. And I would tell you, then of course, if Jupiter is expansion and growth and everything, then why Jupiter is not comfortable in Bharani? See, the womb must limit growth. It should not grow without any boundaries. It should not expand in all boundaries, right? So Venus is a kind of the growth, the necessary growth, that is Venus. But Jupiter is a kind of growth without restriction. Jupiter is growth without restriction. Jupiter is expansion. Jupiter is all about freedom. It's infinite possibility. That is Jupiter. Whereas Bharani is about containment. It is about restriction. It is about holding. So Jupiter struggles here because Bharani says, stay inside the womb. Oh, Jupiter energy, stay inside the womb. But Jupiter says, I want to expand beyond all boundaries. I do not want any boundaries. I hate boundaries. That's what Jupiter says. So Venus is perfect for Bharani. Jupiter is uncomfortable in Bharani. So Bharani has some structure. Of course, it has to have some structure. Then only it will grow. But its structure is not a kind of law. It's not a kind of philosophical drama which belong to Jupiter. It's not a governmental law, right? It's not a kind of morality that here, this whole thing is the Om principle. It's a kind of, it's very much biological, right? It's instinctual. It's life protective discipline. It's not a morality here. It's not at all morality. There is no morality in this whole process, in that cosmic Om process. It's a Om law. If you want to define a law for this particular cosmic Om, it's not at all a moral law. It is a Om law, if you want to define. So Jupiter has nothing to do with these laws and restriction or the boundary that this cosmic Om is following. Because the Om law is saying grow, but only this much. Not more, not less. Only this much. You have boundaries. But Jupiter doesn't like boundaries. Jupiter is all about expansion, growth, freedom. No boundaries for Jupiter. Right? So even the Yama means the restraint principle. That is Yama. But Jupiter is completely opposite of this restraining principle. So here the nourishment that you're seeing is nourishment that belongs to Venus. The boundary and the discipline is what we are calling it, the principle we are calling it as Yama. But Jupiter is always about the moral law, the universal moral law. It's all about growth of wisdom. Jupiter is not about, you know, this particular law or womb nourishment, right? So that womb nourishment is like something like life must be held with some softness, with some warmth and preservation. And the Yama principle, the principle Yama is actually, Yama itself is nothing, it itself is a principle. It protects from overgrowth, it protects from chaos, it protects from dissolution. But Jupiter energy needs freedom, it needs a kind of spacious expansion. It's not suitable in the womb phase at all. Jupiter is not at all fitting in this picture of womb at all. Jupiter should come later in this whole process. Venus is required here, not Jupiter. That's why Venus is the planetary ruler of Bharani, not Jupiter at all. Right? So you can say Venus is very much comfortable in Bharani because Bharani requires that nourishment and preservation. And Venus is about that preservation. Venus is about harmony and nourishment. Jupiter is not comfortable in Bharani because Bharani requires that restraint and containment. But Jupiter wants expansion. It needs some bounded, it's no boundariness, a kind of boundlessness. That's what Jupiter is. Jupiter is always about expansion, growth and freedom and boundlessness. That is Jupiter. Then somebody asked me, what about Mars? Is Mars comfortable in Bharani? When Mars is sitting in its own sign, the Mula Trikona sign, Aries, then can you say Mars is very much comfortable in the Bharani Nakshatra? Right? So, to some extent, you can say Mars is comfortable, but not completely. You may see this particular thing is very much surprising, but as Mars is not completely comfortable in Bharani, of course, not like Jupiter. It's not like Jupiter. Jupiter is completely uncomfortable in Bharani, but Mars, to some extent, it is good. Because see the sign energy here, it's Aries, it's ruled by Mars. But look at the nakshatra energy, it is Bharani, it's ruled by Venus, and there is a Yama principle here. So Bharani lies, of course, inside the sign of Aries, which belongs to Mars. The nakshatra's internal tone here is Venusian, right? What is the nakshatra's internal tone? It's Venusian tone. It is a bit restraining. It's not martial tone, it's not explosive tone, but Mars is a kind of explosive tone personality. So basically what Mars represents energy. That energy is of course required for this mother's womb. Then you may think Mars is comfortable here, but not, I will tell you. But Mars is very much required for some initiative, for some penetration, for some drive, for some kind of cutting forward movement. It is required to break all the barriers, because that Martian strength is required to break the barriers. So what Mars wants to do, it wants to move, it wants to push, it wants to act, it wants to drive, penetrate, it wants to come outwards. That is the Mars. It is energy. Mars is energy. But Bharani represents a kind of containment. It is holding that nourishment. It's a kind of harmonious thing. It requires some warmth. It requires nourishment. It requires harmony. You're getting it? It's not a kind of harsh thing happening here in Bharani Nakshatra. It's the nourishment is happening. It's a very sensitive thing. It's not at all a harsh thing. Gestation. Bharani represents that gestation, it's limiting expansion. That is Bharani here. It's a deep internal processing happening in this cosmic Om here. It is Bharani basically. A kind of pressure cooker energy, as you can see here. Some processing is happening in this cosmic Om. So, as Bharani is always about this restraint and boundaries. Bharani is the Om basically. It must hold life, right? It must hold life till it comes to some kind of some development, and it should allow that development. And what does this Om says? The Om says, do not move fast, grow slowly, stay inside, be contained. This is a very kind of it's the warmth it is representing, nourishment it is representing. You're getting it? The kind of process happening in this Om is a kind of harmonious process. It's a growth process, a limited growth process. But Mars generally says, Mars is a bit harsh, It says break the limits, move quickly, cut through the obstacles. I am the force here. This Martian energy is that. It's the strength, right? So if you feel them, then you can clearly see they are opposing each other, the two forces. So Mars, is it comfortable now? You got the idea, right? So Mars is not comfortable in Bharani. Mars, even though in its own sign Aries, right? Mars has strength here. Mars has strength, right? But strength is not always comfort, right? I will explain you. But Mars has good amount of strength in Bharani. See, Bharani is actually, it is, so Bharani is that containerization. You got the idea, right? So Mars in Bharani is the strength that is pressurized, that is contained. There's a kind of held back. The pressure is contained here. There's a containment for that strength, for that energy. So it's something like, you can imagine Mars in Bharani is like a fire under a closed lid. It's a warrior sitting in silence. It's a strength that cannot be expressed freely. It's contained. The kind of the energy is a closed energy here. So what this can produce? Fire is in a bowl, and it's let us say it's under a closed lid, so it can produce intense internal heat. It is a kind of discipline with pressure, right? You can feel discipline through pressure basically, and it's a kind of power that emerges only after pain, because the power is not allowed to go outside. It is a boundary. Bharani restricts. That's it. Whoever it is. So Mars does not get to act freely here. If he can be trained here, he can be pressurized here. He can be trained, like, even though you are a warrior, you should learn how to sit silently. So Mars is not very much comfortable, but he can be refined. Mars can be refined in Bharani, you can say. Mars can be trained in Bharani. So Mars supplies the required heat. What Mars can do in Bharani then, just sitting silently? Mars can produce the required heat for this whole nourishment, right? But what Bharani says, of course you can produce the heat, but produce it slowly. This cooking process is a bit slow. It's the nourishment process. I can utilize your heat, but do not produce more heat. I will tell you how much heat you have to produce here. I am going to train you. That's what Bharani says. So Bharani actually says, oh my dear Mars, Don't be like a wildfire, right? It's an intense fire that I want. It should be very slow. I will tell you how much to produce and what to produce and when to produce. Okay, till that time keep quiet. So it's a kind of pressurized. Mars is a bit pressurized, but it is trained, right? So it's not a burning fire, it's not a wildfire, it's a controlled fire, it's a directed fire, it's an internal fire. So it's an internal fire. You can do some tapasya, some meditation. You have Mars in Bharani, you know how to maintain the fire. The Bharani will train you how to maintain your fire. So fire maintenance and all, internal fire and all, you can utilize for spirituality. So Bharani basically transform Mars from a kind of kshatriya, means a kind of warrior, to a kind of yogi. Yogi can control the fire, right? The other people, the kshatriyas or the warriors, let us say, warriors cannot control their fire. They show that fire, they do wars, right? But a yogi can control that internal fire, and right, it can maintain the fire very well. So if you have Mars in Bharani, then of course you can become very strong, but only after some inner struggle, because Bharani is going to train you here with that boundaries and all. Like it's something like you may have some immense endurance after some training. You will develop some kind of iron discipline in your life by some training. Bharani will train you, don't worry, and you will mature slowly but deeply, right? So that is how Mars in Bharani works. So I would like to tell you, Venus is very much comfortable. It's in Bharani. The nourishment, the containment. It's a natural fit. Venus in Bharani, but Jupiter is uncomfortable at any cost, because Jupiter always it wants that expansion, freedom, and growth, boundless growth. But this expansion and all, it conflicts with the boundary behavior of Bharani. And then Mars is, of course, to some extent it is comfortable, but not completely comfortable, but can be strongly refined, can be strongly trained. So strength is basically forced inward here, so producing a kind of inner fire. It's an inner fire thing we mainly use in Kundalini yoga and meditation and all. In yogic things we use it. So Mars in Bharani is giving me an idea of yogi, giving me an idea of this Kundalini, the person who is meditating or doing all the yogic things and maintaining the fire, as per the requirements. Controlled fire, directed fire, right? You got the idea, right? So here, Mars in Bharani is like fire in a womb. It's not loose fire. It's not a kind of extinguished fire. It's a contained fire, right? It's transforming into kind of spiritual power. That's what I can tell you here. So Mars is not completely comfortable in Bharani Nakshatra. You are feeling the energy right now. So you may be surprised, Mars is not so comfortable in its own sign, in its own Mula Trikona sign, but that is Bharani here, right? So you're getting it. So how can you take it? How can you understand it? As per the Bharani Nakshatra, you understand this particular thing. See, there are two different structures in Vedic astrology. One layer is sign, the Rashi, another layer is Nakshatra, but the sign is only the field of energy. It only represents the field of energy. Aries, the moment I say Aries, it's the field of energy. It's the planet's overall strength and direction, right? Mars is comfort. Mars has some strength here. That's what you can understand. But Nakshatra is the deeper psychological script. Nakshatra is the deeper psychological script. It's planet's internal behavior and expression. So if you want to understand behavior of a planet completely, you need to understand nakshatras. If you just see the signs, the the zodiac signs, you cannot get the complete idea. So there are so many techniques in astrology. There are so many schools of astrology. One is B.V. Raman school, another one is kind of KP astrology, as Jaimini astrology. There's so many, but this nakshatra astrology, it's something like you're trying to understand the true essence of Vedic astrology. You're trying to understand the truth fundamentally, right? So Mars in Aries is of course strong, it is confident, it is active, I can say that. But if it is under Bharani Nakshatra, the moment you are thinking about in terms of nakshatras, you are getting the real picture that strength is held. The strength of Mars here is held, it is contained, it is internalized, it is a kind of pressure formed energy, right? So it's something like, it's in terms of sign, when you're thinking, yes, Mars is having that energy in the sign of Aries. But how is that energy? It's contained. It's not free here. Mars is not free in Bharani, right? So if you're giving me the script like Mars is in Aries, somebody is asking me, my Mars is in Aries, how it is going to impact my life? So without considering nakshatra, I would say, okay, your Mars is in Aries, so you have good amount of Mars in Aries, having good amount of energy. It acts quickly, directly, openly, with some outward fire. We can say that. But if somebody is asking me, my Mars is in Bharani Nakshatra, so the moment Bharani Nakshatra somebody is saying, I'm getting the truth here. It's the Venus plus that Yama principle, that's what acting on Bharani. So the fire is present, but it is held inside. It's maturing under pressure. It is under refinement. It is under training. You will become a yogi. That's what I will say. So the Mars in Bharani is something like, it's a fierce inner will. It's your inner will that's fierce. It's capacity to endure long pain. You have that capacity because the pressure, the energy is trained here, right? So you have the capacity to endure long pain. You're a silent warrior, right? Your power that builds slowly and releases at the correct time. Because you are under training. So it's not an impulsive action. Mars in Bharani is not impulsive. It's not a scattered heat. It's a focused fire. It's a compressed fire, I would say. So Mars is strong, but not free here in Bharani Nakshatra. Mars in Aries, the moment you say Mars in Aries, it's a strong fire, but the moment you say Mars in Bharani, it's a controlled fire. It's a contained fire, right? So Mars in Bharani is a kind of endurance, but Mars in Ashwini is a kind of impulse, right? So in both the nakshatras, Mars has strength. Mars has strength. In Ashwini, Mars has strength. In Bharani, Mars has strength. But in Ashwini, Mars is like an impulse, right? Just how Bruce Lee gives a kind of kick, right? So that kind of feel you can get. But Mars in Bharani is endurance. So here you can say Mars has strength in the Bharani Nakshatra, but strength is not always comfort. A planet can be strong because it is in its own sign, but it's not comfortable completely because the nakshatra's nature restricting its flow, its nature, the planetary nature, the Martian nature is restricted by the nakshatra's nature, right? So Mars is strong in Bharani because Aries is giving Mars his home ground, its homeland. But Mars is not relaxed in Bharani because the Venus or the Yama principle, it is restricting the Mars to free out for its free outward expression. So Mars in Bharani is strong but internally pressurized. It is refined, it is trained, it produces endurance. It is a nature of yogi. The moment somebody says Mars in Bharani, I am getting the picture of a yogi. It's not a simple easy expression, right? So how it feels, it's something like Mars in Bharani person. If I want to feel him, then I feel that him or her, I would feel like, okay, the person is thinking like this, the native is thinking like this: I have power but I must wait. And the person may think like, yes, I know that I can fight, I have good energy, I can fight, but I must hold back, you know. See, my strength is real, but it's not my time here. I have enough strength. So it's something like a silently sitting warrior. It's something like, so how you have a lot of fire but you're holding it, then you, and even more, your fire is trained here. So it's a kind of tapasya, it's a kind of meditation, right? It's a kind of inner transformation that you're doing here with Mars in Bharani. So it's something like you are able to survive pain, but others cannot. That is you, my dear Mars in Bharani, right? So it's something like the person's will is a kind of iron will, I would say. It's a long-term stamina the person would have. It's often undergo some. The person would often undergo some kind of transformation, because Mars in Bharani is the perfect example of transformation here, because you have a lot of energy but you're getting some training, you are not a load, you're restricted. So that's where your transformation is coming into the picture. You may think I can do anything, but you're not a load to do, and then you will understand one day that you're not a load and you should not, and utilize that energy for something else to become a yogi, or you will be trained when to use that energy. So it's something like, it's a different it's so you need to understand now, by this Mars in Bharani thing, you need to understand strength is not freedom. Even though you have strength, even though Mars has strength here, it does not have enough freedom. So strength is not freedom, and power is not comfort. You have power, but where is your comfort? You have intensity, but where is your ease, right? So that's the fundamental thing when Mars is in Bharani. Now you got, right, you got how Mars feels in Bharani, and you got how Jupiter feels in Bharani, right? So Bharani is always about this nourishment, this harmony. This is the energy, the cosmic womb. The life has to grow. For that, harmony is required, for that, nourishment is required, warmth is required, fertility is required, Shukra is required. Getting it? The joy is required. The Venus is required here. So thanks for watching this video.